Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Thank you very much. Item 1, apologies. Have we any apologies, Rachel?
Apologies from Trish Fenton today, Chair.
Yeah, I did see that. She did copy him. Thank you. Okay, then. Item 2, declarations of interest. I'll just part of this meeting, I'll declare that I'm a member of the Parish Pension Fund.
Likewise, Chair.
And so,
Likewise, Chair.
Oh, everybody, did you catch all that, Rachel? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of last meeting. Rachel's circulated them. Can I sign them to correct record? Well,
do you want me to bring them up on the screen at all, Chair? I can do that if you like. I have got them available here. Or if your committee are happy to have seen them and sign them off, then that's fine. I won't do that.
Are you happy to sign them off, or would you like to see them on the screen?
I've personally seen them, Chair. I'm happy to.
And I will second it.
Yeah,
thank you. Everybody happy? Thank you.
Agree.
Okay, then. Item 4, administration and governance report. To receive administration and governance report. So, where's Chris? Or to you, Chris, is it?
Yes, I've had issues with my camera recently, so if I do disappear off screen, I do apologise. But I am here. I'll share the report on screen if that's helpful to everybody. Just give me 1 second. Thank you. So hopefully that's now come through, and you should be able to see my screen.
Yep.
So apologies, whilst I'm sharing, I won't be able to see any hands go up, so please just do feel free to shout out if anything comes up as we go. As you'll have seen, the agenda is pretty hefty again this morning, so I don't intend to go through this bullet point by bullet point, but there are a couple of specific items within this report which will need committee input and further discussion really. So hopefully we can, if you're happy, we can spend a bit more time discussing those, and I'll just pull out the bits of the report which I think are of interest to committee and will be useful for us to know as we move forward. This report is primarily for information, so please do feel free to refer back to it or stop me as we go. But I thought the first point we probably need to focus on or have a look at is 2.2, which is the annual report produced by the Scheme Advisory Board. They've just been through all the annual reports that the fund produces, like we do when we send it over to them, and they collate a whole of the LGPS UK, England, Wales annual report. And they've just I've collated a few of the highlights into bullet points here for you. And the general trend is that the LGPS is growing. You can see in bullet points 1 and 2 that membership and assets have increased. The scheme's administered to over 6 million scheme members, and assets have increased up to around about 370 billion as at the end of March 2022. So in terms of the size, obviously the LGPS is a very significant player, particularly in Europe when it comes to its scale. So the trend is upwards, and we've seen that locally at the fund as well.
Just before you go on, Chris, on that, yeah, the management charges I thought was quite well, interesting reading, if you like.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Well, I was going to come on to that one. So yeah, it's essentially because the way that some investments are structured, the fees are a percentage basis point. So as you start to manage more money, obviously that increases as a percentage as well. But those figures are quite high, as you can see. Interestingly, the Scheme Advisory Board held a workshop over the past month or so, I guess, which looked at costs and cost transparency and whatnot. And I attended that in Cardiff, and I know the chair of the board attended a session in Wolverhampton as well, which was looking at specifically this. So whilst it's accepted that as you start to manage more money, costs go up because of the nature of the way that the fees are structured, but it's important that we understand what else is going on as well. So there's a bit of work I think that we'll see going on in terms of making sure that fees are what they should be, and that we're getting what we pay for, basically. So I think we'll see some more work on charges and fees over the next few months, most likely. So yeah, I'll keep you updated as work continues on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, just as a new person, roughly what percentage are the fees?
It's different for each asset class, Karina. Maybe that's something we can pick up later on. It depends on what you invested in, I guess, is the simple answer. It's not just a fixed fee for each different for each investment.
2% overall? Don't know.
Couldn't tell you. Sorry, no, I don't know. It is different. One thing we can point out here is by being a member of the Wales Pension Partnership, whilst we've seen fees increase across the LGPS, we've actually been the beneficiary of having made some savings on our fees. So I was speaking to Aaron about this earlier on. So I think perhaps a bit of work that we'll do is we'll collate all that information for committee and present it at a next meeting, perhaps, just so you can see how fees have affected the Powys Fund since being a member of the WPP. I thought that would be useful for you to see. So leave that with us, and we'll present that at the next meeting for you.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Quickly touch on 2.3. This is talking about the annual report and the production of the annual report. We have to publish it by the 1st of December every year. As you know, you have a meeting scheduled for the 29th of November for committee to formally approve it, and the draft version of the annual report is actually within the report pack, and we'll see later on. But the Scheme Advisory Board are sort of taken over a little bit of the hole that's been left by SIPFA when it comes to information and guide around the production of these annual reports. So SIPFA, the Scheme Advisory Board, are looking at how they can help us in the production of these documents, because as you've seen, they're pretty substantial. I think ours is around about 100 pages, as are the majority out there. So anything that we can do to try and make that process easier and clearer and for the readers, like yourselves and the scheme members and stakeholders in the LGPS, the better, really. So we're awaiting with bated breath what the new guidance might look like, and hopefully it'll be something that helps make the reports easier to understand and easier to produce as well.
But it is a good document, Chris.
Oh, I completely agree with you. There's an awful lot in there, but it's pretty substantial. So I think is there a better way of doing it? Is there a different way we can do it?
No,
I don't know.
I accept what you're saying, but it is a document.
No, I appreciate that. You've mentioned that a few times actually. So it is a very helpful document, and it might just be small tweaks. There might not be sweeping changes at all, but we'll wait and see. And obviously, I'll keep you posted on any of those changes that happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in it, isn't there, for you?
Yeah.
There's a lot in there, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a great document, and I'll keep you posted of any changes that are going to be made to it or recommended by the new guidance. I'm going to skip over to 2.5 if that's okay, because it's very similar to what we saw above about in terms of membership and assets within the LGPS. The Scheme Advisory Board have also done an overall evaluation report, which has been drawn from the individual funds valuations as at March 2022. And again, the general trend is that the LGPS is growing. We can see here the average funding level has improved from 98% to 107%. And we've obviously seen an improvement in the funding level locally as well. And we've seen locally what's been reflected in this report as well. So it's pleasing that we're in with the pack. And I think one of the comments is that all the funds have seen an increase in the funding level as well. So the LGPS is in a much better place in terms of its funding level compared to where it was at the last valuation. So steps moving in the right direction. 3.1 is talking about the consultation that was launched a few weeks ago. You'll have seen the response that I prepared for the fund earlier in the week, which was submitted on behalf of the Powys Pension Fund. Essentially, it was looking at pooling and the approach that government wants to take and seek views on pooling. Now it's 5 years down the line. So obviously you'll have seen my response, and the message from Wales was that we think we're doing a good job in Wales, and we'd like it to try and remain like that. So we'll wait and see if that's considered when the consultation is reviewed by government. But there's a strong message from Wales, and we're all basing our responses off the same sort of skeleton document. So it was a strong message from Wales to central government about the work that we're doing here, and we'd like to try and retain the way we operate.
Is any likelihood that they could disband it or not?
Well, one of the I think one of the intentions was they're talking about these super funds, I guess, of 50 billion, which obviously Wales is only around about half of that. But there's all sorts of additional complexities. Obviously in Wales, we have the language issue. We produce everything bilingually, and a merging of a fund, what impact would that have on that? We have some good governance in place in terms of the Joint Governance Committee, the Officer Working Groups. As you merge funds and scale grows, do we lose that oversight? Does that become weakened in any sense? So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We tried to make all these points as part of the response to say, look, this is what we think is working really, really well, and some of the proposals you're suggesting might weaken that position.
Yeah.
So it's gone over to them now with a strong message from Wales, and hopefully we can I think that they'll listen to that, and we'll take it forward.
Yeah, it's quite strong for WPP. Keep our Welsh identity, isn't it, Chris? And I know we're small. Like the funds are meant to be in the beginning were meant to be over 25 billion. That we were about the 20 billion then, weren't we? And now we're saying 50 billion. Well, So,
Yeah, and I think one of the questions is, where have they got this 50 billion from? Where have they done any research into this is the ideal size? We don't know. We haven't seen any of that. So just put a few points back to government and say, look, this is our views on it. We'll have to wait and see.
Could I please ask? I thought we were only worth 8 billion, but then I saw we might be worth 15 billion. I don't know. Where are we? What are we worth?
Karina, go on, Chris. Go on.
Yeah, as a fund, we're approximately 800 million. So we're not at the 1 billion mark.
Oh, sorry. I meant the Welsh Pension Fund.
Yeah, as a WPP, I think overall, in terms of the assets within Wales, it's around about the 20 billion mark, maybe slightly more now, I think. So pretty significant, still a very, very big number, but obviously not near this 50 billion that's being quoted in the consultation. So we've made the points. We've made the points to the government now, and we'll have to wait and see what comes back.
And who could we pool with anyway, geographically?
That's a good question. Yeah, good question. Where would the pool sit in the country? Exactly. We don't know the answers to these questions now, which is one of the points we've been making as well. Really, how will it work?
Thank you.
Okay.
That's Karina.
Thank you. Very quickly on 3.2 McLeod. You've heard me talk about McLeod for a long time. Regulations took effect from the 1st of October. So for any retirements or any payments of benefits, transfers out, those sorts of things at the minute, the scheme, the administration team now do the McLeod check at that point, which is okay for those going forward. But obviously we've got a lot of retrospective work that we have to revisit in terms of any retirements we've paid, any transfers out, refunds, any sort of benefits we've paid over recent years where somebody's in scope. We're going to have to revisit, and it's just brought to light the fact that it's now here, the amount of additional work that's going to mean. We looked at the data and we talked about, I think there's around about 9,000 lines of service history that we'll have to look at with the administration team, and then we'll have to input part-time hours or hours and pay information for those lines. So it's quite significant, and we can work with our employers to help us do that. But there's also things like if we've accepted transfers, we'll have to revisit all these transfers that we've accepted in as well, and potentially ask for part-time hours from other funds as well. So there's quite a bit of work that's going to be ongoing. So we're just in the process of reviewing that. We got the resourcing right when we increased the resource a couple of years ago, just in terms of the impact this is now going to have on the administration team. So I'm just crunching some numbers at the minute behind the scenes, and should anything need to come to committee, I'll bring it to committee at the appropriate time. But just to give you a bit of forward notice that we're looking at how McLeod is potentially going to impact in the long term.
Chris, we've got a couple of questions. David?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, earlier on we were talking about increases in the investment management costs. And I think we stated in that paragraph that administrative costs were pretty stable.
Yes.
This seems to be indicating here in the last paragraph on page 7 that potentially the administrative costs are going to increase, but that was considered in 21. But
yeah,
that's going to have a significant impact again. And just going back to the management costs from investment, is that commensurate with an increase in returns on investment?
No, this will be more focused on the liability side, actually, David. So the cost of scheme members' benefits. So essentially, what McLeod exercise is doing is it's comparing somebody who would have been in the old final salary scheme compared to the new career average scheme, and where they're better off. We award benefits based on the better of the two. So it's actually probably likely to have an impact on the liability side, although we don't think it's going to be significant. As it happens, we've got the actuary here. Maybe we can ask the actuary that when she presents it later on as part of the cash flow item. But that's where it's likely to have an impact on the administration and the liability side rather than the management fee side.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Jane?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, I think somebody commented to me a little while ago that the pension team in Powys had grown from where it was many years ago. I said, yes, but you have to appreciate where the pensions world has shifted to over that period of time, and things like McLeod, some of the other stuff that we've seen coming through, the whole focus around climate and the rest of it, very much there's been an increase in the activity across pension funds. And I can assure you that whenever we look at our resources, you know, we do that benchmarking piece against other authorities and other funds just to see where we are. We don't have the same economies of scale in Powys, which can show in terms of the costings and the benchmarking data. But as long as we're comfortable and committee is comfortable in terms of having that data to look at, it means, you know, when we do come asking for additional resource for the team, that you have all of that data to enable you to make an appropriate decision then in terms of that. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because I think, as I said, over the last 10 or so years, things have changed quite significantly.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. I think from my point of view, I think it's actually a shorter window than that. Actually, I started doing this job in 5 years ago, believe it or not, and it's just the pensions industry, the pensions world has just transformed almost in that short period. So yeah, we're not the only ones in this position. That's important to state as well. We aren't the only fund considering all these sorts of things. We're all looking at it now, scratching our heads, thinking about how best we want to tackle this. So just support Jane's comment there. There's a lot of number crunching and data evidence gathering and comparison work going on behind the scenes. And if it needs to come up to committee, you'll have comfort, hopefully, that we'll have gone through all these things and present you that data should you need to see it. I can see Gerard's hands up, I think.
Yeah. Gerard?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just to complement what's been said, from a board situation, obviously we are looking very much at breaches, and we have to record and report breaches. And from my wider experience in other places, there is a key link between the scale of admin support and the frequency of breaches. So the pension regulator does expect all pension providers to have adequate resources for the pensions administration function. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Gerard.
Thank you, everybody. So I'll just move on very briefly. Section 4 is just for your information. From what the pension regulators produced over the past couple of months since the last meeting, but perhaps we can focus on the risk register, if that's okay. Specifically on a new addition to it. I'll scroll down to that in 1 second. Committee will probably remember at the last meeting that it was identified that probably climate risk should be included as a risk on its own on the agenda. Previously, climate was picked up within the responsible investment policy and the risk attached to it, but we thought it was appropriate. No, it was raised by committee that we probably should include it on the risk register. So if it's okay with committee, I'll scroll down straight to that new risk, which is Invest. I think it's Invest 00012, and seek committee's views and have a discussion on that item, if that's okay.
Yep.
I think it's a bit further on, so just bear me a sec whilst I scroll down to it. And this is the opportunity for committee to make sure they're comfortable with the risk and consider any wording and whatnot. I have shared this with the board, and I know that the chair of the board did come back with a comment on it, which I'll raise as we actually look at it. So Invest 12, here it is. So I'll try and make it a little bit bigger for everyone, hopefully they can see it. So the wording I've used is to say the fund fails to adequately account for climate change, climate risk, and environmental, social, and governance (ESG) factors as the actual name of the risk. Identify the potential consequence as financial loss to assets held in the fund, and potential for stranded assets, failure to achieve desired investment returns leading to fall in employer level and increased employer contribution rates. And then I tried to capture some mitigations that we have in place, both locally and at the WPP as well. So there's a bullet points, 6 or 7 bullet points there of mitigating actions and controls that we have to try and manage this risk. But obviously now this one's over to committee really for discussion as to whether they feel the wording is appropriate, whether the scores are appropriate. I've tried to reflect what the WPP have done within their risk register on this as well, because obviously a lot of our investments are through the WPP now, so it felt appropriate to try and incorporate what the WPP are doing as well. So this is sort of in line with what the WPP have produced, but that's what I've put on the risk register for now. I think there's one other comment from the chair of the board about we haven't really made any reference to the future and the environment and whatnot in the future. So maybe I could consider adding that as an item somewhere within this risk. But over to committee now. You've had enough of me talking for the past couple of minutes, so please, what are committee views on this as an item on the risk register?
Any questions? The point with the proxy voting is Robeco, is it, Chris, after you're talking about there?
Yes, it is, yeah, or whoever the provider might be at WPP, but currently, obviously, WPP appoint Robeco, so it'd be via Robeco at this point, yeah.
Adam?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, first and foremost, really good to see it. Thank you. Very much appreciated. And by and large, spot on. I suspect as a relative newbie to the committee, I'm not particularly well placed to judge some of these things like the numbers, yeah, inherent residual, etc. But the overall one is to really welcome it, that it's there and that we can interrogate it. And then a little bit later when we talk about responsible investment subcommittee or whatever it's controlled, yes, that ability for it to also look at the risk on a more regular basis is key, yeah, so that we're not just doing it inside this one committee, shutting it down and leaving it on. Two things I would sort of just comment on. So one is obviously the response to climate risk and linked to climate risk, but also operating separately is a risk of ecological collapse. So we have it running separately, issues around our ecosystems, and that's a big issue when it comes to like food production and the like. So that's just a marker. I'm not asking for it to be put in. It's just a note maybe in the minute that says there is an additional risk, twin risk that runs alongside this. The one I did want to sort of touch on, because obviously the potential consequences here is financial loss to assets held within the fund. I think there's also an impact upon the pension holders. There's an issue here about almost life expectancy and the like. So there's a risk on the other side of the equation as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. And that's actually the point that the chair of the board made, Adam. Actually, you're coming from exactly the same place on this one. Yeah.
So and again, I don't quite know what that definitively looks like when you write it out. But if there's a line in there, then we can keep coming back to it. We know we've marked it. So that was just those two things to put those markers down. But by and large, just really pleased to see it in there. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. You okay with that, Chris?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll make those amendments and I can recirculate it to committee to make sure they're comfortable with the new wording. And as Adam rightly says, this is the kind of thing that we could consider at the responsible investment subgroup and then present it to committee in its finished format. We've almost already had these discussions before it's got to the committee meeting. Obviously, committee can feed into those as well. But yeah, I think it's a good first step. If you're happy to leave that with me, I'll recirculate with updated wording, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
very happy.
Okay, great. So that was it in terms of the updates to the risk register. I'll take that away and recirculate. There was one other item within the report. Oh, sorry, David's got his hand up as well.
Oh, sorry, David.
I'm just a bit curious, actually. I just wanted a bit more detail because I picked up one risk. I think it's in the first register, admin 0010, with regards to payments to overseas pensions.
Yep.
And where it's saying payments continue to potentially deceased pensioners.
Yes.
I'm just curious as to what sort of financial risk that equates to. I know it's amber, it's showing amber, so presumably, hopefully, it isn't too much. But then the review summary is talking about an existence exercise plan for 2023. So first of all, I was just wondering what an existence exercise looks like. And are we saying within that risk that we're actually paying pensions into closed bank accounts overseas?
No, I think that what we're saying, is that there's a risk that we're paying pensions into deceased overseas pensioners. And one of the mitigations for that is to carry out this existence check, which is essentially verifying that the person overseas is still alive. And one of the facilities that we're able to use to do that is, not that we would do this, but Western Union, for example, who are one of the, now called Convera, one of the providers that we use to pay our overseas pensioners, they have offices in each country, and the person presents a passport, for example, as a proof of existence. Once you receive that proof back from Western Union or whatever provider, that's the comfort that we've had that this person is still alive and they have actually been seen in person. And interestingly, I sent an email this morning to the administration team because the pension managers around Wales are meeting this morning, just for them to ask what the other funds have done. and see if we can learn from their experiences and do this. But essentially, the risk is that the people overseas are dead. To be fair, that is exactly the same risk as over here. But obviously, with them being overseas, it's a bit harder to check. So what we will do is we'll use a third party to help us with this exercise, and it'll be kicked off before the end of the year.
Okay.
In terms of numbers, I think we have around about mid-teens pensioners living overseas. So we're not talking enormous numbers in terms of financial risk. Nevertheless, it's something we haven't done before, and we do want to try and do before the close of 2023.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks for that.
I think officers of the pension fund should visit, Chris.
Well, maybe I should make that request as
with the chair. With the chair.
Sure. There are a couple on the other side of the world, so it might not be a bad request actually. So thank you. Leave that with me. Yeah. Thank you. So if we're okay with the risk registers, I'll take those points on board and recirculate. But the one remaining item on this report that I do want to focus on is on the breaches register. Now, committee will be aware that I present the breaches register at every meeting, and I say we've not identified any new breaches other than the 2 existing ones that are on there to do with notification of deferred benefits and payments of refunds, which are a national thing, but it's right that we keep them on our breaches register. But we have, since we increased the resource in the section actually and appointed an employer related post, we've been able to do a lot more work on assessing our employers within the fund's performance. And this is performance against statutory timescales of submitting contribution returns to us. So every month, employers pay their employees, deduct the contributions from them, and then send them over to the fund. There are statutory timescales attached to this, and where that timescale deadline is not met, technically it's a breach of the legislation. So we've been carrying out a review over the past couple of years, and I've identified there's been a few instances where this statutory timescale has not been met. Therefore, by default, it's a breach of the legislation. So I've just tried to identify that within the breaches register and add it to the breaches register. So if I just scroll down, it's just to make committee aware that we've identified this new breach of legislation and we're monitoring it. Sorry, the text is really, really small here. So it's the new one at the bottom here, 2324, and it's the late receipt of contributions from employers, and just goes into a bit more detail saying the regulations say the employers have got to do it within a certain time frame. Where they don't, it's a breach, we should record it. So we've now started to do that, and there's another item later on in the agenda which provides a bit more detail behind why this is now recorded as a breach. So it's just for committee's information really that we've identified a new breach, and we will continue to monitor it, and I'll give you a bit more detail later on in the confidential part of the meeting.
Adam?
Well, this may come in the confidential part of the meeting, a bit like your giving me a sense of scale to the number of pension holders abroad. A sense of scale of this?
Single digit scheme members affected. I think
well, what it was.
Yeah, no, so we've identified a couple of occasions where it's been a bit of a repeat offence by a particular group, but in terms of the actual scheme members affected, 4 or 5. So not a massive impact, but regardless, it is a breach of the legislation, so it's only right and proper that we record it. And this has already been through board as well. So we've had this. I've had the same discussion with board, and board are comfortable that this now sits on the breaches register as well. So hopefully we'll come onto that a bit more detail in the later part of the meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, Adam. Great. Okay, is that the end report, Chris?
That was it. Yeah. So that was just for information. So I guess the recommendation from it is really that committee consider invest 0012 as a new risk, which I think we have covered. I'll recirculate it with the appropriate wording, and if committee are happy with that, then we'll get the risk register published with that updated risk on it. But that's it for me, Chair.
Okay, so you're happy to add that to the risk register, everybody?
Yeah,
formal.
Yeah, happy to move, Chair.
Thank you both. Are we happy?
Yeah,
happy.
And we're happy to note this report, really. Do you have to do that as well, do we, Chris?
Yes, please, just note the information.
Somebody propose a second and note this report. Hugh?
Yeah, happy, Chair, to second.
And we can see everybody there. Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, item number 5, new fund employer. Is it Leighton and Forden?
Yes. Yeah, just for information, just to let the committee know, there's a new employer, a new community council has joined the scheme, and we're working with them at the minute to onboard them into the electronic data transfer system and just working through their responsibilities and providing some training so that they don't appear as a breach, for example, in the late return of contributions that we saw earlier on. So they've been onboarded and we're now working through them in terms of their responsibilities and whatnot that they need to do as an employer within the LGPS. So purely for information, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 6, WPP update. Chris again.
It is me. Sorry, everybody. You're hearing a lot from me this morning, aren't you? I didn't intend, I'm happy to answer any questions, to go through this because there's quite a lot of papers attached here, point by point, and the fact that we have the operator and Russell Investments speaking to us later on in the confidential section to go through this into too much detail. But just a few things that I wanted to pull out of the reports, just to draw committee's attention to them, really, because I'm aware there's a lot of words in there and a lot of graphs, as we discussed earlier. So obviously the WPP takes up quite a significant part of my time. A lot of work goes on. What they've been looking at recently is a lot of policy reviews. So they've reviewed the voting engagement, which you touched on earlier. The climate risk policy has been reviewed, but they've also published a breaches and error policy. So similar to the breaches we talked about just in the previous item, the WPP have produced a breaches sort of policy, and that's really for us as constituent authorities within the WPP. So, for example, if we're not happy with the way the host authority is doing something, where do we go? What do we do about it? So this policy is trying to identify what the steps that we would follow as Powys Pension Fund, should we not be happy with the way that the host authority are doing something. So it's a useful step progress, and it's seen as a positive, useful step forward. It's seen as progress in terms of the governance around the WPP, and it gives us a port of call as to what we can do if there are any issues. As was pointed out at the Joint Governance Committee, that if there's a problem with an officer, for example, at the host authority, then there are 7 other Section 151 officers around Wales that we can now call upon as well to chat things through as well. So as an entity, we feel quite comfortable that there's a lot of information and experience out there for us to call on should we need to. But just to make committee aware, that's a new policy that's been produced and will be being published if it's not already published. The information pack that's attached to this is twice as long as usual because there's been 2 Joint Governance Committee meetings since the last Pensions Investment Committee meeting. So you've essentially got both packs here. Hopefully you find it helpful. From very early on, there was a few officers in the WPP saying we want to try and deliver a consistent message to our committees about work that's going on at WPP. Because what we found was that we're all producing separate reports, perhaps covering different topics. So what the WPP have tried to do to try and improve that is produce these packs for us. So essentially what you've got in front of you now is the pack that comes from the WPP to say, these are the kind of things that we can be presenting to our committee. So hopefully it's helpful. It's consistent now, but I do realise it's quite lengthy as well. So if you do have any feedback on it, then please do let me know and I can take that back to WPP. From my perspective, it certainly helps me when preparing the report because I've got all the information made available to me, which I can just share. So that was really all I wanted to pull out of the report at this stage, keeping in mind that we have actually got the operator, a representative from the operator later on who's able to speak to us and we can touch on any operator issues you might have later on. So that was it from me, Chair, on this item, but I am happy to take any questions.
Yeah, any questions? No?
No, not really.
No,
So
thank
we're
you.
happy to note the contents. Can I propose I can help you to note the contents, please? Arul,
Happy.
seconder, please. Are you there? Yeah, Hugh, are we happy? Looks like. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're going to item 7. Are we happy? We're going to exempt session, excluding the press and the public.
I'm happy to move that to confidential status.
Lovely. Thank you, Arul. Are we happy? Committee happy? Yeah, we all look all happy. Okay, item 8, operator update. To receive the operator update presentation.
Excuse me, Chair.
Can we
Sorry.
just check? Chair, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
wait, I'll wait for you to go into switch it all off. Okay,
I'll just finish the session for the public. Bear with me just 2 seconds.